Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Beginning Bugs. This episode is going to continue looking over the various unit choices available in the Tyranid Codex, and today we are going to be looking at troop choices. Once again, I'm just going to go down the list in the order that they are presented in the Tyranid Codex. So let's just get started nice and quick. The first choice offered is Tyranid Warriors. Historically, they've been the worst troop choice that Tyranids have had, at least since I started back in 5th edition. However, now, I think honestly, Warriors are probably one of the best troop choices that we can take, and they're even one of the most durable units in the Codex, thanks to the buffs that they got from Blood of Baal. With the new stratagem of Unyielding Chitin, their 3 wounds can become incredibly tanky. Just be warned that this stratagem only works against shooting attacks, so if your opponent hits you with a Thunderhammer, then you're in trouble. However, now that Thunderhammers are only going to be AP 2, you do actually get the benefit of your 4-up save against those weapons that used to slaughter an entire squad. Because now you can just use that adaptive physiology for enhanced resistance and ignore AP 1 and 2, and suddenly you actually get a 4-up save, whereas you used to not get saves at all against Thunderhammers. The best thing about Warriors are their versatility. This means that basically you get to equip Warriors with whatever you want. I like to run them either as Chronos with full guns, and by full guns I mean Death Spitters and Venom Cannons, or run them completely bare bones in basically any other Hive fleet and use them just to grab objectives. Bare bones meaning just 2 sets of Scything Talons, keeping them at that cheap as possible 21 points per model. Consider running them in Jormungandr or Leviathan for that added durability. I might add Bone Swords depending on how you want to run them, but their Bone Swords are really the only melee upgrade worth looking at. The extra attack and AP is actually pretty good for 3 points, but they're still only 1 damage, so you actually hit a lot less harder than you'd think. If you do have 9 or more warriors in your list, then I would consider taking a Tyranid Prime as an HQ choice, as that +1 to hit really increases their damage output. If you're running less than 9, I don't think it's worth the points. Next up in the troops choice are Genestealers. Now, Genestealers are the iconic shock troop of the Tyranid hordes, and they are the first Tyranids that were ever encountered in the Milky Way galaxy. Genestealers have always been a bit of a glass cannon unit, being an absolute blender in combat with up to 4 attacks each in melee. Combined with the rending ability, they used to just utterly shred through Marines. The ability to also have Scything Talons and getting to choose between Rending Claws or Scything Talons meant that if you were fighting demons or Harlequins, then you had an easy choice, switched up your weapons if your AP doesn't matter, and you could butcher those targets with ease as well. The Genestealer's ability to advance and charge, combined with their 8-inch base move, makes them a very mobile melee threat, some of the fastest models that Tyranids really have. If you combine them with the Swarm Lord to slingshot them up the board, you're going to have a very reliable turn 1 charge. And 20 Stealers hitting your opponent's lines turn 1 was the go-to list for Tyranids for a very long time. All the way back from when the latest Tyranid Codex dropped until about the last quarter of 8th edition. Unfortunately, with the meta switching out to toughness 5 models everywhere, their strength 4 melee weapons have dropped off tremendously in terms of killing power, and having only 1 damage was bad enough with just Primaris Marines being introduced, but now that all Marines have 2 wounds each, and Gravis Marines now kind of looking like they're going to be the really popular thing, so T5 3-wound infantry models kind of being the name of the game, Genestealers just do not hit those targets very hard at all, and if you combine that with the fact that 9th edition raised their cost to 15 points per model without any increase in their durability, a unit of 20 Genestealers costs 300 points, and even if they make that turn 1 charge at full strength, I don't think they're really going to be able to kill 300 points of enemy figures anymore. And then they just die to your opponent's shooting, as still T4 with only a single wound and a 5-up save is just not durable enough. They used to be able to wrap the opponent to ensure their survival, but Space Marines gaining Shock Assault meant that they had enough attacks to kill the Genestealers anyways. But now, especially with 9th edition, that new Desperate Breakout stratagem can allow your opponent to leave combat even if they're wrapped, and then just shoot the Stealers off the table anyways. I'm hoping these guys come back in a big way in our next book, because they really are the iconic unit of the Tyranid faction. But unfortunately, right now, I think they're just a little too expensive for what they bring to the table. Moving on, next up are Termigans, or Termigans. They are the filler of the Tyranid army and the basic chaff unit. They did get bumped up to that minimum 5 points per model, which is the new floor of 9th edition. But at least they came out ahead of Grots. So these guys are your objective grabbers. You use them to screen out your opponent's like scary threats, and they're basically the definition of the term meat shield. You don't really expect them to do any damage, and they're the unit that you throw away to grab objectives and basically body block your opponent. This does not mean that they're not valuable. I honestly think if you want 60 of these, I think that you do want 60 of these in just about all your lists. 6 squads of 10 that just hide in your lines, and then you metabolic overdrive a unit in every turn onto an opponent's objective just to steal it from them right before they get to score their primary, is probably the most effective strategy that Tyranids have in 9th edition. If you want to see just how successful that can really be, check out the video that I just released before this of my RTT where I played the Gaunt Carpet. On the other hand, if you do want this unit to do damage, you can put them in a Jormungandr detachment and take a squad of 30 of them, giving all of them Devourers, and then take 3 cheap Raveners and use the Jormungandr strat to deep strike them, and then the new psychic power to reroll all hit rolls against a target unit on a turn from which you arrive from reserve. Combine that with the single-minded annihilation stratagem to shoot twice, and you end up with these 30 Termigans firing 180 shots, hitting on 4s, rerolling against an enemy unit. And you just drown the enemy in dice, which is what Tyranids are honestly meant to do. This is very expensive and basically involves building a significant portion of your list around it, but it's honestly really effective at taking down units like Grotesques or anything whose invuln save is just as good as their armor save. Next up, we have Hormagans, and these are to be looked at exactly like the Termigans. They're just meat shields that are used to grab objectives from the enemy. Keep in mind, you're not going to be holding these objectives by the time it's your turn. Gaunts are used purely for stealing points away from your opponent. If you're to take 60 Gaunts in your list, I would have 2 of those 6 units be Hormagans, as that 2 extra inches of movement can really be worth the extra point per model. Alternatively, you could take a massive unit of 30 of these guys, which can really tie up a lot of stuff in your opponent's army with their Bounding Leap ability, which allows them to pile in and consolidate 6 inches. Just keep in mind that this is not as effective as it used to be, thanks to the new coherency rules, where units of 11 or more, or 6 or more, have to be within coherency of 2 models. But it is a solid way to charge something that's non-threatening and then pile into something else, such as a repulsor. Again, this unit is not here to do damage, just to turn off your opponent's threats, steal their objectives, but if done correctly, this is the best way for Tyranids to really win games in 9th edition. Rippers are the next unit that we have, and these guys have been solid gold for a really long time. Rippers win games is something that's been said for a number of editions now, and it still holds true today. While not quite as good as Nurglings, Rippers are cheap, have objectives secured, and best of all, they can deep strike for free. These guys are great at ensuring that you have engage on all fronts for as long as possible, and if there are any objectives left unattended, they easily just grab them for you. The best of all, though, is their small profile. These are really tiny models that can hide out of line of sight where most models can't. Because of this, they're great at holding the objectives, even your own deployment zone, and anywhere that you can really find just a small pillar to hide out of line of sight. They do die really quickly, but can actually be surprisingly annoying to your opponent. They take just a little bit more damage than your opponent expects. Honestly, leadership is kind of the biggest issue I run into with them, as they normally deep strike outside of Synapse. And if they lose even a single base, then that'll force a morale check, which you fail on a 5+. Just keep in mind, you do have a new strat for them from the Blood of Ball book, which makes them -1 to hit until they move. So if they land on an objective out of line of sight, and your opponent might be looking their way with something like a Scorpius or a Whirlwind, I'd actually consider using that strat just to keep that unit alive. But that's all for troops. There's really not a huge selection, but there are enough to get the job done. The important thing to remember about our troops is that they're there to grab objectives. They don't do damage. They're just there for the objective game, and they do this actually very effectively just because of the number of movement tricks available to Tyranids. Keep in mind that if you do go first, if you're able to screen out your opponent's entire deployment zone with just a big unit of Gaunts, if you're able to do that for the first 2 turns and make it where your opponent can't even leave their deployment zone, it basically guarantees you a win. This is a total change in mindset that's new for 9th edition, but it's honestly one of the most effective tactics that I have seen. And damage is not the only way to win Warhammer anymore. And once again, I strongly recommend you check out my other video on the Gaunt Carpet that I just released. And you'll see exactly what I mean, where I don't even make attacks against my opponent and I can still win the game. Otherwise, just be sure to hit that subscribe button so you know when I release other videos, and let me know any questions that you have in the comment section below. Other than that, thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Thanks.